Some stories are as old as time, and some stories are timeless. Ready to hear a wholesome tale? A story of someone much like you and me who left her mark in history. Everyone has a story. This is episode number 8, The Unrivaled Queen of Teenspeak. She thought she'd have a better life in New York. She thought New York City would be the best place in the world to be a princess, or for that matter, a novelist. Instead, Megan threw yet another rejection letter into the circular file. What does a girl have to do to get published around here? Every publisher in North America had rejected her book, or so it seemed. She looked at her very first story, sitting, forgotten in her desk drawer. Handwritten, full of mistakes, it was a child's dream about a puppy whose family is killed in a freak tornado. Maybe we should go for something a little less dark, she thought. Born in Bloomington, Indiana, Megan was an ordinary girl living an ordinary life, except that she had rather extraordinary dreams. Megan's enthusiasm for stories started at an early age. During the hot summer months, she would seek refuge in the air conditioning of her local library, where she began to delve into the world of books. She especially loved reading comics, science fiction, and all the princess books she could lay her little hands on. Megan didn't just read about princesses, she dreamed of becoming a princess herself. Her dreams sometimes felt so real that she practically convinced herself that she was an actual princess stuck in an ordinary world, living an ordinary girl's life. She sometimes informed her mom and dad that her real parents, the king and queen, would one day come for her. Then, of course, everyone had better start being a lot nicer to her. In an interesting way, her little dreams would someday be realized, although not exactly in the way she imagined. Megan's love of princess stories wasn't anything unusual. Many girls have fantasies about being a princess. But for Megan, these stories were also a means of escape, however briefly, from the harsh realities of her childhood. Megan and her brother had a somewhat troubled life at home. Not that they were the only kids in the world to ever have such problems, but to say the least, it was less than ideal. Her family was plagued with alcoholism. Their grandmother, Megan's uncle, and most of all, their father. She actually thought her dad was a great person, except for the ways that drunkenness affected him. Education had been a big deal in their family, but Megan really didn't do well in school. Mainly, it was that she simply wasn't good at math. Consequently, she recalls being told by her drunken father that she'd be a failure and never succeed. She learned at an early age that there's a nasty and destructive side to alcohol. Memories like these became painfully etched in her mind. As a hobby and later to help get through those awkward high school years, Megan indulged her creativity and vivid imagination and started writing her own stories. Ironically, she made her first attempt at publishing on the very day of her father's funeral. Until then, she'd been afraid that what her father said to her was true. But at age 26, Megan was determined to do something to ensure that she wouldn't be the failure he talked about. In contrast, Megan's mother was like a pleasant springtime breeze that helped wash away much of the negative stuff. Megan's mother was her biggest supporter, and she encouraged Megan to follow her artistic pursuits. So, after graduating from the University of Indiana, Megan moved to New York City to pursue a career as an illustrator. But instead, she became an assistant manager in a freshman dormitory. Hardly a dream occupation, but it provided a lot of free time for her to indulge her hobby, writing. Megan still had hopes of getting her stories published. She repeatedly sent manuscripts to all the publishers she could think of. For 7 years, all she got was rejection and disappointment. She didn't allow herself to be deterred. She couldn't give up. That would be letting them win. So, she persevered, and her determination finally paid off when she met someone willing to accept her first published work, a romance novel, not kid-friendly. She followed that with several more romance novels before trying her hand at writing for young readers. The inspiration for the pivotal story in Megan's writing career was very personal. After her father's death, Megan's mother began dating again and eventually remarried one of Megan's professors. That was weird. Later, Megan adapted a semi-autobiographical account of those events into a story. She had kept a journal throughout high school, and she referred to it as she was writing this story. In fact, the voice of her main character actually emerged from Megan's personal observations and musings. Turns out it was a rather good story. A good story that was rejected by 17 publishers. Fortunately, she'd sent out 18 letters. The letter from the last publisher finally arrived. HarperCollins was stamped across the return address. It was now or never. She had to open it. She took a deep breath, and there it was, the acceptance letter. Years after receiving that letter, Megan has gone on to become one of the most popular authors of her time. She's had numerous #1 spots on the New York Times bestsellers list. Over 25 million copies of her books are in print, and they've been published in at least 38 countries. Megan's big break came with a novel inspired by her childhood fantasies about the adventures of a young girl who finds out she is a princess. Megan never actually fulfilled her childhood dreams about becoming a real-life princess, but one of her characters did. This time, it was a phone call rather than a letter. Walt Disney Pictures. What could they want with her? Well, they wanted to make her stories into a film. The Princess Diaries in 2001 starred Anne Hathaway and the legendary Julie Andrews. It became an instant hit, especially among girls and young women. A rare production by today's standards, it's a story that wouldn't make your grandmother blush. Apparently, many people approved because the movie brought in well over $100 million in box office revenue. Recognizing they were onto something good, Disney came back for a sequel, The Princess Diaries 2, in 2004. The movies were clean, funny, and just good stories. Megan Patricia Cabot, popularly known as Meg Cabot, began as a dreamer. She then went from being a writer to a celebrity who was known throughout the kingdom. In a way, that's sort of like being a modern-day princess. And that's her story. Hey, thanks for spending a few good minutes with me. You're listening to the Everyone Has a Story podcast, a production of realmedia.us. I'm Rodney Powell. If you like what you're hearing, how about sharing it with a few good friends? Better yet, share it with your kids. It'll give you something to talk about. Add it to your favorites so you can catch each new episode in all its freshness. Lord willing, we'll get together for another good tale. We won't be running out of stories to share because everyone has a story.